Alright, so I'm doing a little bit of work on the Jaggernaut today. There are times you get buried in other work and you don't get to work on what you want to work on. And I've been wanting to get this project done forever. And now I'm to the point where I don't even want to work on this project. I want to get rid of it because I have another dream in mind. But I'm going to take a huge loss on this thing if I just scrap it. I've got a couple big block Cadillac engines, and I could sell them individually. Maybe, if I can find the right buyers. The buyers who want them are willing to pay big money for these motors. Finding buyers for these motors is hard. And the Jaggernaut itself is, the car is mostly finished, but it has some odds and ends it needs straightening out to get back on track. And so that's what I've been tackling today. I couldn't get the torque converter bolts in the engine. It kept locking up when I was turning it over. I got in there, and the oil pickup tube, since the big block Cadillacs did not come in a rear sump except in the Eldorados. I do have an Eldorado pan, but they're really deep, and I wanted to retain oil capacity without cutting that Eldorado pan to shorten it up. And so I made my own pan, made my own dipstick tube. That's a mid-sump pan that's been converted. And my converted dipstick tube was in the way of the crankshaft. So I had to clean that up, figure that, get that sorted out. I'd turned it over on the engine stand before I put it in the car, but something shifted and I had to get in there and see why it was shifting and fix that. So got that all nailed together. I'm ready to put the engine back in, but I want to change out the power steering rack, because you can see here the power steering rack is pinched off. This is a power steering rack that's been converted to manual steering. Now, I didn't have a problem with it back in the day. Air Force had me working out all the time. My team captain, though, said, hey, this thing is a real beast to steer. You need to put power steering back on it. Oh, okay, all right. So I found a power steering setup at the salvage yard. I just happened to spot an XJ6, and I ran right over and grabbed the power steering rack. So I'm going to put that back into the Jaggernaut, and that should fix power steering. But what I want to talk about today is down here. How do you get a tie rod end off? So if you have a good boot, which this one does not, you can see the boot's blown out, but if you have a brand new tie rod end and you've got to take it back off and it's not coming loose, how do you get it off? Well, let me zip this off here. Okay, so I got the nut off the tie rod end. How do you get that out without destroying a boot? Well, my very first time at the auto dealership, I was working on a suspension and I needed to bust a tie rod end loose. I asked the lead tech, I said, where's the Picklefork for getting a tie rod end off? And he looked at me like I was stupid. He said, what do you need a Picklefork for? You're just going to tear stuff up. And I said, well, I've got to get the tie rod end loose. He said, let me show you something. Grab two hammers. So I grabbed two hammers and he said, hit it on both sides at the same time and the resonance dropped that right out. So I went, and didn't pop loose. And he looked at me and he said, if it doesn't come loose, you're not hitting it hard enough. He said, hit it like you got a pair. Well, the difficulty is hitting it at both sides at the same time in a controlled manner without beating up everything else, but hitting it as hard as you can. I hit the brake caliper that time. I've got the jack stand in the way of my swing. There we go, pops loose. There's only been twice in my life that I hadn't been able to get a ball joint loose that way. One was on my Chevy truck. It was big and bad. It was the ball joint, not the tie rod end, and I could not get it out. I ended up having to get an air hammer on it, and that popped it loose. Now, some guys will put a nut on the top here and hammer on the nut thinking the nut will save the tie rod end. Don't count on it. I've seen people dork up threads doing that. That nut will strip the threads if you hit it hard enough. Hitting it on both sides, take a look at this. You can't even see, if I can get it to focus, you can't even really see where I was hitting. These are beefy. If you bend this up hammering on it, it shouldn't have been on your car in the first place. This takes a beating when you're driving down the road. Your hammers, these little dinky hammers, this is a 1 pound mini sledge, this is a 10 ounce or 12 ounce hammer, I don't know which it is, 10 or 12. They are not going to beat this up. and tear it up. You could, if you really wailed on it, if you put it in a bench vise and decided you wanted to destroy it, you could destroy it with these hammers. But doing what I just did there, getting this tie rod end loose, no, you're not going to tear it up. That's how you get ball joints and tie rod ends loose. Now, ball joints, sometimes it's really hard to get in there and swing on it, but that's how you do it. If it doesn't come loose, you're not hitting it hard enough. So I hope that helps you out and saves you from tearing up your tie rod end boots.